Welcome back to the podcast. It is so lovely to have you all here today. And I am so excited to interview Tegan Tarot. And we met a number of years ago and have stayed in touch. And you've just been so, pardon me, pivotal in helping me extract things from my journey and keep moving forward in this wild direction. So, Tegan supports her clients to explore the many paths of future oriented growth in their lives. How appropriate. I hadn't even read your bio yet when I said what I just said. Tegan's intuitive gifts resurfaced after a near death experience in her late 20s. As part of her recovery process, tarot, yoga, and astrology became tools of support for her as she rebuilt her life. Tegan's understanding of tarot and astrology, combined with thousands of hours of practice, have now flourished into a rich anchor point for gaining deeper multidimensional perspectives that Tegan shares with her clients. I
Well,
love
thank you. Thank you, Emily. You read my bio and I'm like, oh yeah, that's my story. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
it. Sums it right up. So, well, let's start from the beginning then. Tell us about this near death experience. I didn't know that that had happened.
Well, I don't want to bore you with the details. I was, the gist of it is caught up in the medical system. I had a rupture in my, I'm kind of like how to frame this so it's not the long story. A misdiagnosis,
Mhm.
and I ended up having a part of my body rupture internally from bleeding, but I didn't know what was going on. And so I went to a hospital, and I was in Montreal at the time, so it's all French speaking, which is not my language. I don't really have a good sense of that language. So the communication was difficult. I didn't know what was going on. And I ended up waiting in the like waiting room, or not waiting room, but like on a bed for some attention. And I was there slowly bleeding to death for about 18 hours. And by the time the doctor came around, he was like kind of like an emergency situation. And they brought me in an ambulance to a different hospital. And anyways, it all got sorted out. But it was this moment, there was a moment in that experience where I surrendered, and I'm like, if this is my time to go, I release, I'm in acknowledgement. Like it was a surrender to whatever the next chapter is. And at that time, I had no idea really about a mind, body, spirit connection. I was really in an academic world. I was making art. I was, having kind of a rock and roll lifestyle. It was a lot of fun. Oh my God, it was so much fun, but obviously not healthy for me. And I feel like that was my Saturn return. That was my turning point of like, hey, if you're going to be in this world, there's a different path for you. And literally every single thing in my life changed after that experience. And it was a true rebuilding that it's still an adventure.
Mhm.
So um yeah, without getting into all the gory details, I'm like, that's the gist of what happened.
Like,
And
did
yeah,
you, so you had a point where you thought, like, did you ever feel like you were actually going to die?
yeah, I did.
Oh.
Yeah, because I couldn't breathe. And I learned later with internal bleeding, it can seize up like your lungs or your shoulder. Like there's some part of you where I could barely inhale and exhale. Like I just had wisps of breath happening. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Again, I surrender.
Mhm.
So
You get on the other side of this as far as you're alive.
yeah.
And you're having that moment where maybe you're sitting at home and you're just, you probably can't move very well because you're tending to yourself, you're healing. What is your thought process? You think, I've had this lifestyle that's, and I know we say it doesn't serve us, but at the same time, it's like you said, it's so much fun and it does serve that. What is this point where what were the steps you took? Why was it tarot? Why was it astrology? Why did you head in the direction of these things? What
Yeah.
what
Good question. Like at the time, it's kind of guesswork. Just following an advice, a recommendation, a referral. I didn't know my lifestyle was bad. I was pretty determined to continue it. I had invested a lot of time and money into this path, and I wasn't at all seeing it. Like, it was unfortunate. I felt I get knocked off track, and need to get back on track. That was my conscious self. And
Yes.
there was also this part where I felt like I wasn't fully in my body, that I was looking out of my eyes the way we look at, in a movie theater watching a film, where it's like, I'm here, but there's a distance between me and the outside world. And I went to a massage therapist who at that time too, I didn't want anyone touching my body. So I was like, hi, I don't actually want you to touch me, but I need help getting back in my body. I don't know what's going on. I don't have a language for this, but I'm really struggling here. And bless her heart, she just like laid me on the table face down. And I don't know specifically if she did Reiki work, but just the presence of her kindness and her warmth and being held in that space with no physical touching, helped me like feel safe. And she said, listen, you to follow up with this, because it's not necessarily like we can do this every day. Try yoga, mind, body, spirit, connect those three together. And that can be a step in helping you integrate the distance that you feel. And at this time, it was 2005. So yoga it was still pretty popular, but it wasn't quite as big as it maybe commercially big as is today. So I found a studio and I started practicing, and that was instrumental, right? Breathing, body, mindfulness, like all those teachings bring us forward was really, really helpful for step one, coming back into my body. And then within the year, a friend of mine gave me a gift card to get a tarot reading. And I was like, what? I know what tarot is, but do people actually do that? Is that something for real? I don't know. And she's like, oh my gosh, this woman is amazing. You got to go see her. So I went, and within like that first opening spread, right, I'm in tears. I'm like, how do you know all this about me? I thought I buried those secrets pretty deeply under the rug. Like, what is this? And she was so just present in her body and present in her space and not attached to any specific outcome. She wasn't here to save me or heal me or anything. But she said, kind of like, look, honey, this stuff that's coming up isn't going to go away. If you want to work with it, I will support you. And if you want to put it back under the rug, we'll just turn the page and move on. We can do that right now, but it's not going to go away. So it's your choice. And what do you want to do? And that there was a part, I showed up and I'm like, all right, well, let's work on this together. So she became my counselor, working with cards. And for the next 6 months, I was pretty serious about that work and investigation, and it was also my entry point into multidimensional spaces and psychology on a new level. Like, I learned so much from her. And then I was like, okay, what are these cards? I need to get some. Can you show me how to do it? I'm basically obsessed with it. And I got my deck, Rider-Waite deck, took a class from her, and the excitement has never stopped. It just was my thing. I would dream of the cards. I'd dream of the symbols. I was in the airport traveling a lot in those days. I'd go early and kind of see people waiting, and I'd be like, do you want a tarot reading? Can I read your cards? Are you interested in this? In retrospect, I'm like, what a crazy lady I was. But I was coming from a place of passion and sincerity and excitement, which I still carry in my work today.
Yeah. Would people say yes to the card readings? Would people say no?
Oh yeah. You're kind of waiting around for your plane. They're like, sure, yeah, what is this? How does it work? What are you doing? And so I just tell them. I wouldn't, it wasn't as formal as the way I have my business run today, but it was just, let's pull a few cards, see what happens. I just wanted to talk. I wanted to share. It was just so fun.
Love that. I love that. If that had been me truly at any point in my life, I would have said yes. Give it up. So, where does tarot come from? What's the history of it?
Yeah, that's such a good question too, because it's sort of like what have we recovered? What is the history that we're kind of aware of? And so my understanding, or the story I like to tell about the origins of tarot, come into play in Europe in the mid 1400s, around the Renaissance time, and it blossomed both in Italy and France at the same time. I don't think one was really ahead of the other. Like Italy and France, they always do things a little different in their own way. And why was this happening? The trade routes from China had changed. Previously, they were going China to Egypt. That had shifted, and now it was China to Venice. So there were new trade routes and new information and discoveries, and the Chinese culture had already, used the map of the stars in astronomy to navigate ocean ways. And they brought in, I think it was the abacus and different modern at that time inventions. And as this landed on the shores of Europe, Europe was very fertile. So there was this, resources to build and bring into manifestation what we now reference as like the Renaissance period. Many, many things happened during that time, and tarot was one of them. So the symbolism is mixed from, as symbols are, it's not really one thing. It's like a feeling, an experience, a teaching. There's layers. We can look at in our life today, an apple, right? And here we're kind of like, all right, this is a delicious apple. Wait, is it organic? Where did you buy it? Did you pick it off a tree? Does it have a reference to my computer system and technology? Or if you go into like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, is it going to poison me? There's so many ways the symbol of an apple can be related and translated. And so when we look at the origins of tarot, these symbols were brought into a deck of playing cards that didn't necessarily come across as like a tool for divination. And yet also at that time, shortly after the Renaissance period, a more strict rule came in where, women weren't allowed in church. There were a lot of rules, a lot of, tyranny, dictatorship, things like this. So the more heart-based connection, where you have your own connection to source, your own connection to the divine, tarot kind of created this bridge. You didn't need a priest, and you didn't need a rabbi or whomever to translate. You could, potentially access that yourself. So it has been on the periphery, but it's always been there. And then there was this big resurgence in the early 20th century with that's when the Rider-Waite deck was created. Aleister Crowley had his chapter and more of the dark arts of tarot, but his deck is quite popular still today. And the early 20th century, there was a resurgence of working with, whether you call it the occult or the metaphysical. And, we can see how that's now kind of quantum leaped into the chapter that we're in today.
Yeah. Wow. That's so neat. So when people give different interpretations of cards, because there's so many different decks, do you specifically sense, is there an energy to each of these individual decks? I know the intention, like you said, is this direct connection with your source, sort of assistance with communication, maybe help us see blind spots. I don't know if I don't want to put words into your mouth. So do you notice with these different decks, I think you'd mentioned, the dark arts, and there's good and bad and everything. So can you sense the energy of different decks, or how does that work for you? Because I know you, and we're going to talk about this, and I know how clear and intentional your connection is to source. So yeah, have you noticed that different vibes from different decks?
Yes, and gray area. So, there's, first off, for anyone who's kind of like, I want to buy a deck, what's the right deck? My always response is go into a store that has many options. If you have to look online, that's fine too, but it's nice to kind of touch the cards and see what you're drawn to. Maybe it's an oracle deck, maybe it's traditional tarot. Who knows? There's lots of incredible, beautiful, resonant options out there. See what pulls you forward, because the number one thing is you're going to want to hold those cards, work with them, like get to know them, love them. For me, it's appreciate their beauty, their aesthetic, and then, kind of unfold. They open, they speak, you build a rapport in a language. So that's the hands down best way to approach how do I get my deck. But as we look deeper into the symbolism and the energy, it's, it comes down to intention, right? Like who designed this? What is the intention? Are we able to know a little bit about the time frame or the geography that these cards came from? What was that person doing? What is their what was going on then? And do you want to open your psychic space, your heart space, your intuitive space, and align with what was happening, at the origins? Maybe you're very resonant, really, really connected to Egyptian mythology. So maybe it's worth finding a deck with an author who's really on that page as well. So you're kind of already in tune with that same language. But it is sort of, and then the other part is like, why limit yourself to one deck? So you might start with one and you're like, this was the deck that was my entry point. And then as I got to read the cards, I was more drawn to the symbolism over here. So just like, colors and life and music, there's so many choices, and what can be really right for me might not resonate for you or, another person at all.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So tarot cards. You mentioned oracle deck, I think, or oracle cards. What's an oracle to you by definition?
Like a messenger. That's how there's a message. And so those decks, the oracle cards I use more at the animal messengers, but I think it's the same root, animal spirit. I see it as a full message in the card. So angel cards can fit in there, oracle cards. The tarot is a pretty specific system, 78 cards. They have different categories. Oracle cards are more freestyle. You can have a 22 deck oracle or 44, whatever feels right for you.
Okay. So one of the impressions I think people have is that when we're working with tarot cards, we put the power in this deck of cards, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. How do you like to work with the cards?
Well, I guess like the blunt version is the power is not in the cards. And a funny example or analogy is we're both on a computer right now and we're connecting through the internet. Is the internet like my computer? No, we use the computer to access the internet and do what we need to do. And in our world, anything can be on that internet and people will use it in different ways. And so in this analogy, the cards are like the laptop or the computer. They're a gateway, a tool. But that said, you want to have a type of operating system that you enjoy working with. So whatever tools you want to work with, and this, there's so many ways. Some people don't even use cards. Well, like yourself, right? You have this direct inner language. You don't need this a bridge to anchor it for you, as far as I can see. And but I do like using the cards. So and in my sessions, I'll say, choose a pile, 1, 2, or 3, or left, right, center. It's not like the fate of your life will go wrong or better if you choose one or the other. The energy, the connection, the resonance is exactly what it is. And the cards for me help bring a tone. There is just something that really works with my language of light and symbol and pattern that the cards show me, help me kind of understand the symbols I see in my mind on deeper layers of, is this an ego level? Is this unconscious? Is this in the collective? Is this is this like past life? Is this ancestral? It helps me kind of frame the vast amount of information I see. Otherwise, I'm if you can imagine like looking through a window at the internet, what am I actually looking at here? It can be kind of overwhelming. So I call the tarot cards as an anchor point to help me language and articulate the deeper, symbols and codes and patterns that are coming up in the higher, like, what do I say? Higher realms. Let's just name it like that.
Mm. So during a session, you start out by setting intentions. And and by the way, if anyone's interested, I highly recommend a session with Tegan. It's incredibly insightful and powerful. And her info is going to be linked in this podcast info, by the way, and you'll give it at the end. So, what is your intention or process as you open up a session with a client? And maybe it begins even before the session. I don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That intention is there before the session, really, even at the time. It can go as back, and I'm sure you see this in your own work, and even times we've worked together where right timing, it's so much about right timing, and that sense of like, I need to book an appointment. Oh, I gotta wait 6 weeks. Okay, whatever, I'll just book it in. Well, who knows what's coming down that line, in 6 weeks time, where all of a sudden you're like, thank goodness I've got this like landing spot to now unravel what happened that last 48 hours. So there is a bigger timing into how we see each other, or vice versa. A text or an email, hey Tegan, can you fit me in? Like, what have you got? And I'm like, yes, I just had a cancellation. How about a couple hours from now? It can go that way too. So yes, this is what validates there is already a connection there. But my own setting the intention, I am basically like, it's my life. It's my lifestyle. It's how I choose my food and hydrate and sleep and connect with nature. Like, there's not really a separation of crazy life and then tarot life. It is I live my work. You live your work. Once this beautiful place of connection opens up, it's so real. It's so vibrant. It's so present all the time. And so when I bring my focus into being in a client session, I do set an intention. I work with the directions. I anchor my space. I clear my field. I ground, I get excited. I talk a lot, but before that, I ground myself. And then I do have an opening intention that I share verbally with each client so they can hear the words. And it's just a few lines there to bring them into the space I'm in, and then we connect and open and see what's there. And it really is working in the highest alignment, mutually beneficial for highest clarity, well-being, truth, integrity. And through that intention, there's also what is non-spoken, that I'm not looking for manipulation. I'm not allowing any interference of addiction programming or fear-based, those fear-based things that can trigger people into, the shady tarot stuff of like, oh, you're cursed, and for $500 I can lift the curse. Like, none of that. This is what comes in is like clear and for the highest intent and resonates on a heart vibration. This is a heart path. This is heart work. The heart, our physical heart, our inner space, it holds the gateway of our soul. So there's an honor in this. And I guess another part that comes in that's worth mentioning is my accountability for the words I speak, the intentions I set, the space I hold. And Emily, I know I would have just assumed that you're on page with this too, is we can't, like, we're accountable. So if we're kind of like, oh, I'm just going to mess around with this person because they're the ex of my friend and they did someone wrong. Oh, that's coming back to us like tenfold. Like, and I don't say I work out of fear. I work out of love. We're all trying to figure our space, our life out. We're all have good things happening. We all have very challenging things happening. And when we enter a heart-based realm, that ego, steps aside. And it's like, how can I help support somebody or share or listen, just listen to what someone's going through to help them feel and like maybe lessen the weight of what they've kept silent or private because there's nowhere else to put it. There's nowhere else to share it. So that's, that's a very sacred space that I set the intention for, but is collaborated with each client. It is a collaboration.
It brings tears to my eyes because it feels so good that these spaces exist. And you've said a couple minutes ago how you create a zone of safety. And I think those are my words, but to have that space where clients can just like, let's cut through the crap, let's cut through the noise, help me see myself, help me figure out these things that are so tender. They're so tender. So, and thank you for explaining the fact that this is one of the things I help clients see because I've lived it myself. I'm like, alignment is in all aspects of life. I'm like, beware. Beware. I can't even say it's like this glorious thing. Of course it is. Of course it is. But it just requires a lot of adjustments and alignment. So, what are some of the benefits? So, say someone is newish to tarot or they've dipped their toes in a bit. What are some of the benefits of a session?
Hmm. Well, basically, it can change your life, or it doesn't resonate with you at all. And that was like a fun entertainment, and you walk away and forget about it. And everything in between. But straight up, it allows you to see your life in a new perspective. And because I don't, eventually clients will return and there's a sense of rapport and understanding. But because I'm not speaking from an intellectual, rational part of my brain, I'm working in the non-linear realms. It's like tarot is like collage, in energy work. I see this symbol and I see this piece, and it's starting to thread here, and here's a pattern. So when I'm not in a client session, those things disappear, and can't really remember, can't really rename what that was. So the benefit of receiving that is that something, whatever, however abstract or maybe however precise, lands for that person, that client, and gives them something to kind of chew on or lean into or think about that maybe they didn't see it. We get very focused in I'm going to say like linear way and with time and matter, and working in an expansive non-linear way can really give more of a vision to a person to say like, oh, I am good at that. I can trust that skill I have. Or I wasn't sure about dating this person, and now I can like really trust my intuition there. No, that's an old pattern. I don't want to do that. So I guess the easy way to say it is having a tarot session empowers the person to see their life in a way that is confirming and validating, and hopefully help make choices in their life that feel very aligned, where they're like, I can do that. I can see that. Tarot does not necessarily fix or answer anything. But the nature of it comes in to help us be more present in our life so that we can then proceed from this place of, this is what I want, and I can name it and I can take action on it and essentially become stronger, more self-aware. If you want to go to those levels, and
Yeah.
if you're just trying to decide what house to buy, it can give you some interesting insight. We can go in that direction too.
I remember one of the sessions you and I had recently, it was like everything was ambiguous. Because that was the energy I was needing, by the way. That's not a reflection of Tegan. That was the energy that was needing. But also, you mentioned the validation, and I love that people can get that validation from your sessions, because when you live this life, we're in our bodies, we're in our minds, but then we're soul energy, and our soul's speaking to us too and communicating with us and guiding us. And that's the part where we kind of have a hard time, at least where we're at in life right now, saying, okay, how do I make sense of this? And to me, tarot just really helps you pull those things down from the ethers and help you make sense of it and help you validate that, which is so appreciative. The other thing I really appreciate about the work you do is when you hold space for this energy and this information, it also helps lead a client
Mm.
where they're not in that place in that moment, but when they re-listen to a session, they get more tidbits or they realize, oh, I see it now. I'll listen to sessions with you and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm great at self energy work, and I mean, of course I still have so much to learn, but I do really good work at it. And then I listen to sessions and I'm like, oh my gosh, I missed half of that. And I'm catching up months down the line, but I appreciate that because I love to be challenged and I love to say, let's go. So I just really appreciate that you hold that space for people too, to rise up within themselves. I think that's so important.
Well, thank you. And it goes back to that beginning, in the bio of like, how did you come into tarot? And I had someone hold that space for me. And once, I think it's a Toni Morrison quote, if you're free, your job is to share freedom. If you've had that space of empowerment, that's part of your job, to empower others. Like, this is why we learn things and go through these crazy life experiences. So
I love that. It's so potent because one of one of the things that I really appreciate is how you know how to hold your energy. And there's a part of me I have a very strong energy, and it can make some people uncomfortable. And you've always just held your energy. You're like unwavering. And I really appreciate that. And it allows me to come to you and just be able to just so, and then to your point, for me, one of my purposes is to help other people be in their power. And as such, each of us get to that place where in community we can do all of this for each other. So, as if someone's starting out and you mentioned, okay, so they go into a beautiful spot to look for some tarot decks, or they um, go online and find a tarot deck that they've really felt drawn to, how would you recommend they start the process for themselves?
yeah, I love that. I love that question because it's the start of a new relationship, right? It's kind of like, with me, it was a frantic deep dive. I want to know everything all at once. And occasionally I meet other people, other students, and they're like, more, like, give me more. And it's exciting, like a fire to work with them. And other relationships are more delicate. It's one just sitting and looking at the deck for a while, holding it, carrying it, bringing in ritual, putting a little altar space and bringing them in with some flowers and just sort of like feeling into the vibration and color, and how do I want to place these cards? How do I want to begin this relationship? What's the space I'm creating to embark on this journey? Could be a way too.
Shoot,
I
really
Mhm.
quick. I said, okay, shoot, because I have tarot decks. Some are in a drawer, some are in a closet. Oopsies.
That's okay. Remember, it's the computer, the access to the internet. It's not like your cat. You're like, I wouldn't put my cat in the drawer. But there's different ways. I have plants everywhere I talk to them, but I understand, it's anyways, there's no shoot. It's just, we do what we do, and it's exactly perfect in that moment. And gosh, the woman I learned from, she had this huge purse that she just threw her deck in there. And so you always spend her time kind of pulling out all these missing cards. Like, are they all here? Did everything show up? And
That
it did
was
not, I
hilarious.
know it didn't take away from her readings at all. I teach,
Love it. A special little way of doing it. Yeah.
exactly. But when you're really like, okay, I want to learn to read. I teach tarot, and I did it in person for years and years. And then, stuff happened, and now I'm on Zoom. And occasionally I go through classes in person, like in Zoom, but I have brought my content into like pre-recorded foundation tarot classes. And it's actually a combination of foundation and intermediate classes woven in one place. And yes, I go through each card in the meaning, just like you would find in a book, the universal kind of archetypal meaning, but also I bring in, how do you feel the cards intuitively, the elements? Where does this sit in your body, maybe somatically? Where do these symbols sit for you in your own life experience? Who do you know that might be similar to the way this card is expressing itself? So there's a subtle level as well in those classes about really starting to understand consciously how these cards are actually like pinging and awakening and showing you different aspects of your own inner world to be brought forth into the language, into the translation of the readings, whether you're reading for yourself or for somebody else. So I see this as also, well, we could talk about this too. It's like starting to kind of bring that intuitive language in, because our intuition isn't this like random muse that knocks on our door and is like, okay, I got some messages for you. It's learning to decode how we receive all that we receive. And the window of tarot, as I've shaped these classes, can help start bringing, like, sewing those threads together.
So, is it sort of like they are training wheels to help bring forth your unique intuition?
Yes, absolutely. And no, I wouldn't even say training wheels, because these classes, if someone's been working with tarot for a while and they're like, I want to next level it, I want to know something more, but it's not necessarily an advanced mentorship, but how can I see the cards in a new way, a new language? How can I go deeper? There has to be something more. These classes could be juicy because you're bringing your voice, your language, your wisdom of life experience forward, and not just remembering, oh, like, an art history class. Oh, that's what I learned in class. That's what it means. It's like, this is how I relate to that card. And it takes your readings to the next level.
So you have a class for, say, someone like me who would be interested in tarot just to learn it more for myself. And then you also have a class for people that want to go further and maybe make it a bit more of their profession. What are the classes? How are those deduced?
That's a series I started last summer. We met online, through Zoom. So I think it was 6 weeks. It could easily be 12. And it was the advanced tarot mentorship. So it was for people who'd already had certainly a base foundation, and a handful of them were actively and are actively reading for other people. And they want to take it more about the symbolism, the secrets, the codes, like, what are we really looking at? How do we know when cards come up? How do we work with it multidimensionally? How do we work with cards with chakras and our body? How do you know what chakra you're looking at? How does astrology play into it? These sort of things that aren't written in a book, but yet, but one day, I don't know if it's going to be my book, but the information is available. So I would help the group, and then we'd work together. Like, it was more interactive than the recorded classes. But I just figure that's kind of where we're headed. Those beginner classes are available online for kind of getting people up to speed, to really be working with the speed and the pace that consciousness is expanding. And if tarot's your tool, let's, figure out the basics and then meet together, and let's, really start applying this in real time. There's no more waiting anymore. I think, like, collectively 2023, even at the end of last year, it's go time. It's like, you've made the choice. This is your purpose. This is what you're doing. Let's go. There's no more, should I, shouldn't I? It's like, if you didn't make the choice, the choice was made for you. Like, something has happened and it's go time. So that's what I'm excited to respond to with my classes, live classes moving forward.
I love the community element too. It's so fun to see what other people are picking up on and learning and meet people that are in this because we don't always have people like that in our direct inline community.
Yeah,
Do you offer one-on-one, like I don't like the word VIP, but intensive or one-on-one type mentorship too?
I do. And I call them weekly therapeutic sessions to just kind of open that up for whatever intention somebody wants to work with me at that capacity. But I have a couple clients right now that see me weekly that have been with me for a long time. And sometimes it's to learn deeper and mentor them specifically with their craft. And others, it can be more in their own personal development. They're like, I don't want to learn tarot. I just want to go deeper with build my own intuition and move through life with this. It's kind of like counseling in a way, but I'm not telling them what to do or fixing anything. It's just holding this really creative space for them to kind of give shape to their life. And those can be set up for as long as you want. Maybe it's for a 6-week period. Maybe it's for 6 years. We'll see how it goes.
That's awesome. So, one of the other things you mentioned in the beginning is that you also looked into astrology. And and years ago, I did. So, you have chosen to do natal chart astrology. I want to ask you why you only do natal chart astrology. And this was a turning point for me with astrology when I met with you because I had only done Western traditional, uh, transits. I had done Western transit astrology. So, number one, what is the difference between natal chart and transits? Number two, why do you only do natal astrology? And I just want to say our session was 90 minutes because that's what your sessions are. We could have gone on forever. It totally changed my perspective on astrology. There's nooks, crannies, doors through doors. There's all these tiny little aspects that just validated, oh, that is me. Yet society tells me I'm supposed to be this way, but my astrology chart says no, but you just are who you are. And so it just kind of let me go, oh, whew, okay, cool. So I'm just going to keep being who I am and head in that direction. And
Yeah.
yeah.
You answered your own question. That's why I do natal astrology, because it's so juicy. It's the blueprint of our soul. I want to know where is the first door to find the second door? Like, how does that planet talk with this planet? A natal astrology chart is that moment, a first breath. When you're born, where on the planet did you have that first breath? The time, location, date, all of that. So we look at where were the planets in that moment, what was above the horizon line and what was below, like on the other side of the earth. And there's a translation between above the horizon line is conscious, and we need to bring these energies out into the world through our life experience. And the planets, under in the bottom part are more internal. That's where we go in self investigation and understanding to access those dynamics. And the design of the chart itself is the map, it's the map of you. And so, and by contrast, doing transits and progressions and, all that, the more contemporary, not even contemporary, but there's a lot of conversation about, where's like we have Saturn going into Pisces this week. So there's a lot of conversation about that transit. We're looking at transits are like the here and now in the moment of today, collectively, where are the planets? What are they doing? And in a reading with that, the astrologer will look at your natal chart and then compare that to the planets that are transiting our sky today or on your birthday or on a special event. And this tends to be, each astrologer is going to be different. It tends to be predictive. It's really easy to slip into patterns because the mathematics and the geometry of how astrology is created, we can say, well, the last time Saturn went into Pisces, was in the 1800s. And that's when this, French Revolution happened. So does that mean we're going to have a similar French Revolution type energy happening collectively this week? And then it can bring in the fear, and you're like, oh my God, like, what does that say about Ukraine or whatever? We can start jumping ahead. And it kind of has its place. But my passion, I love people. I love the universe of complexity that each and every single person holds. And to work with the natal chart really speaks to that depth of, who are you on a soul level? And it is, I just will just not would never lose interest there, never. And through this work of meeting people, seeing people on that level, talking to individuals about their chart on the natal chart, and the discoveries of even awakening things and potentials where they're like, oh yeah, I always kind of thought that was a weakness, or I always kind of put that on the back burner. And we can discuss it more and see, maybe because it was invalidated at that time, it's now a remembering time or a reawakening time to be used in a way where you have more autonomy in your life that you didn't have in the past. It's so beautiful, and it's obviously makes me really excited because I feel like I've got a million words to say about it, but I'll just pause there and say, like, yeah, I'm quite passionate about natal astrology.
Those, to me, are the most important parts to bring forward. Those things that we were told, no, 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 shove that down. Like, that is literally, to me, the essence of what the world needs from each of us.
Yeah. Why not? So what we need in ourselves. And even though I have these tools, right? I hear my words, I'll listen later and be like, oh, I sound so great. I look at my life and I'm like, oh, I still, I got that conversation coming up with my family. I got the thing, how am I going to negotiate this thing? There's always something. It's never ending, right? We're always learning, how do I work with this tool in a way that isn't, too dominating for that person? Or, how do I find my voice, the right tone to speak my truth? What is my truth? How do I appreciate that? And what are my gifts and how do I bring them forward? It's why we're here, to like live and share and learn, and hopefully, be compassionate with one another and less judgmental. That's a benefit of doing this work too, where we can hold a space for others while they spiral and we're like, nah, it is Mercury retrograde. Like, I gotta, I'll just breathe and let this pass. I don't need to be activated by this fight that is coming my way or whatever.
How do you develop? Gosh, there's a few questions I want to ask you, but how do you continue to develop yourself, your tools, your work?
At this point, and I've been on this path pretty like consciously since 2007. So it's been a life journey so far. Right now, what really opens for me is being in nature. And I live in a forest. I live in a very remote place. So I'm very lucky. I can be at the ocean side in like 10 minutes, and there's old growth trees where I live. So it's very beautiful. And listening, breathing, it's like attuning in to nature's time, nature's seasons, the light. I don't set an alarm. I don't have electronics near me at night. So I rise, the full moon, yeah, it's going to wake me up, but the sunrise does as well. And before, when I wind down at night, it's such a practice. My intention most nights with my good practice, turn off Netflix, put my computer, my TV away, my phone, all that. Around 7:30 or 8, and then see where it takes me. Maybe I stay up till midnight. Maybe I'm in bed at 10. Maybe I do a long meditation. Maybe I have tea and talk to my dog. I don't know, but I want to create these spaces to receive what is, and that calmness and the being in cycle and having a routine, a discipline that I show up for, and listening to my body. what causes anxiety and trying to identify those sources and shift, what's in alignment, what's not. I also have a couple very close friends that call me out on stuff in a very loving way.
Mine
And then
are the same. It's necessary.
yeah, so it's not so much of working with the cards anymore, although that was a deep, thorough part, necessary, had its time and its place. And now I'm much more the direct,
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, the experience, the beingness. I like how you mentioned being disciplined about having a routine for yourself. Yet, I think we think of discipline as something that's a little bit painful. I think we think of a routine as something that is the same 6 steps in the exact same order with the exact same time frame. And what you just shared, and this is an energetic trend I'm seeing, is in order for us to truly care for our well-being moving forward, these are things we really have to commit to, which is how do we care for ourselves in the evening? How do we care for ourselves upon waking? There is so much good stuff energetically that comes through us during those times, especially in the waking hours. So, but what you shared is okay, my discipline and my commitment is that I shut these things down by X time. And then what do I need? Tapping into what feels right. What do I need? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it changes. It changes,
Of course.
you know, and having the space to listen. And that's the result of this practice. Wanting that space, craving that space, and enjoying what I'm listening to. In the beginning, maybe it was like, oh, a 6-step process. Oh, I want to binge watch something. And then I'm like, okay, no, I got the commitment, listen to my intuition. But once you start connecting, it's like once you drink more water, you're like, oh, I'm thirsty for it. You just, a bigger part of you is like, yes, yes, yes. And then you just show up.
Yeah. Nothing else. It's the most incredible feeling, and there really isn't anything that compares that. And I think living your purpose too feels pretty amazing. So, you mentioned your dog.
Yes.
You meet him. So the way that you and I met is my friend Megan, who's been on the podcast. Her and I went on a trip to Vancouver. You're living in the city, and we set an intention to find someone like yourself to do a session. And this was back when her and I were still like a bit more hush hush about these things. We could only do them together. You couldn't tell other people we were doing them. And so I set an intention, and I found you on Yelp.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this is when you had an office space out of your home. And so we got to go in person and have a session with you, and it was incredible. I mean, we still talk about it to this day. And you gave me an animal card that I still have, and that has been huge symbolism for me and my journey. And it continues to show up in different ways, ironically through different tarot readers too, which is kind of
Fascinating.
crazy. Yeah. And it's just been such a good baseline for me. So, and then at the same time, I have also, for funsies, gotten myself into some predicaments with some other folks that, always remind me of how important it is, the work it is, individuals like yourself or myself present in this world, right? So let's, for just a second, talk about what are some of the, I don't want to say bad representations of tarot, but let's call them like misunderstandings that people have out there, because really what you do, and then there's these things we see too where it's, if this person wants you to, is he going to call you, or is he going to or whatever, right? Sort of that. So what are some of the misrepresentations of tarot to you?
Um, well, the movie industry certainly doesn't help. And there's a lot coming up now, stuff where the tarot plays a part, and it's usually the death card or the reader's a total crazy person, where the character is like, well, I like anything but that. It's kind of this goofy, dark, crazy
Right.
lady. Right.
Totally.
So a bit cliched. And, I guess whatever, it's a place, but where it becomes actually upsetting and potentially dangerous are people of low intention, manipulation, self-serving, basically con artists who have somewhat of a gift or connect to, they don't even know, maybe don't even know where or who they connect to. They just like kind of don't have a clean filtration system in their own personal life or their energy work. They've got a deck of cards. They have some gifts, so you get a reading and you're like, well, that's true. That's true. Boom. And then they throw in something that is manipulative, hurtful, fear-based, addictive, whatever, something in there that you're just like, well, maybe that's true because A and B, I know I can validate those are true. So C, even though it seems kind of disgusting or scary, is that true as well? And I just, I have had people come to me, whether they book sessions or just through email, sharing some of these experiences that they've gone through in cities that I've lived in this world. It's not just whomever. And the client saying like, am I cursed? Did I get rid of this bad spirit? Or my grandfather that passed, is he going to be stuck in this in-between realm now? Like all, these things where it's so vulnerable. We might feel some shame to even share it with anybody. And yet they're like, well, I've already paid this reader, thousands of dollars, but it doesn't seem to really work. And so my hackles get up and I'm like, wow, red flag. Like, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my goodness, now I don't know if I like tarot or not, comes back to basics with whatever, whether you're talking to a dentist, whether you're talking to a tarot reader, whether you're talking to quote friend or person or dating. How do you feel in your body? How do you feel when you connect with them? Yes, there can be a chemistry. Yes, there can be a pull. Yes, there can be a desire, but is there a sweaty, anxious, fear, nervous, clenching feeling with that? Like they have some power that you don't? Or is there an expansive, loving, supportive, empowering, I feel richer because this person is in my life. I feel like I can trust them because I like who I am more when I'm with them. And that's your truth. And yeah.
Yeah, I think it also to have someone in your corner supporting this element of your life and making you be more empowered on your journey, so every area of your life shifts and you become happier and more happens for you. And I do, do I think there's powers that be on the earth plane that don't want us in that place? Sure. I don't spend a lot of time with that, but I mean, I think it's how our society is structured. So I can see how there's still so much misinformation out there because it's encouraged that there's this misinformation out there. Also, it's hard work. Like getting into alignment and living this life that feels so supportive to go from where we've been to where we want to be. I it's not the easiest path. It's self-responsibility. It's making different choices, sometimes making more challenging choices. So yeah, sometimes it's just easier to phone 1-800 psychic tarot and say, tell me the answer.
Oh my God, don't do it. I mean, it's like, I don't know, walking into a parking lot and be like, all right, give me a tattoo, whatever. Like, oh my God. Okay, maybe you have the best experience of your life, or maybe you need antibiotics after. I don't know.
I needed some antibiotics after some psychic sessions. But see, that was, I mean, for me at the time, so I just loved going in and I have loved giving myself like the full experience, the good and the bad. Now I'm focusing more on the good, but
You know what? Me too. I lived in New York for a couple of years. Those hands, tarot, oracle, whatever, get your future read. Oh yeah, I did it too. But I learned from that as my like bank account dwindled. I'm just like, I never feel satisfied. I never like walk away feeling like, well, now that was answered, but now I'm questioning this, or when's that bad thing going to happen? Or, all this it's like eating delicious junk food. It's so fun at the time. And then later you're like, oh, my stomach hurts.
Oh,
And I also want to speak to earlier you mentioned, or like a few minutes ago, you said this path takes a lot of work. And it does. And it's lonely. And you can feel really isolated from people who you thought you were close to. And now, they don't get you anymore. You're no fun anymore, whatever. And yet there's also this whole other world of what's the word, like love and appreciation, that when you tap into it, those deeper truths are so healing on a soul level, that it kind of it's like worth it. It is always worth it in the end. And the love and the permission and the gentleness that spirit speaks to each and every one of us is a kindness. When you hear it, it's a kindness that breaks your heart open every time. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. There's no punishment, shame, guilt. There's choice in everything. These things words that I can speak of that you're like, yeah. Every self-help book kind of goes there. But when you feel those direct messages in your heart and that permission of truly unconditional love and support and guidance, when you might feel like, oh, universe, I am so lost. Like, why is this happening? How did I get in this situation? And this gentle guidance comes in. Sometimes it's humor that's like, what are you going to do about it, Tegan? Haha, and other times it's like, I gotcha.
yeah.
It's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah. So you mentioned we have choices. So what based on your experience is your interpretation of our free will and our divine path, and how do the two sort of coexist?
I'm like, wouldn't you love to read that book? I mean, oh my
Yes.
goodness. It's
Yes.
a beautiful question. To have free will to make choices, we need disclosure, right? When you have all the information ahead of you, you can say, all right, this is what I see, this is what I know, I make this choice.
Mhm.
That's the framework. So
Right.
our
Disclosure meaning, but what happens when we don't have the future vision?
Yeah. Well, it's not even future vision. Is this person telling the truth? How do my family programming says, if I got to work hard, then I'm valid. So what choices am I making with my career? Well, I want to be valid. I want to work hard. So I better do this. It's like, how to really see, it's okay. Maybe let me reword that a bit. I went on a tangent.
Don't worry, with this podcast, they're used to me going on tangents all the time.
It's but I love your question. I love your question so much. It's so free will. I I'm going to communicate that from a place of, when I'm in alignment and I'm speaking from the ideal, like the highest place. Free will is honoring your heart in the choice. This is what I choose. This is what I stand by with all the circumstances. Maybe it's a tough love situation. Maybe it's a situation that feels liberating and I need to be brave. Maybe I'm going to disappoint my whole entire business team or shock my partner, but this is what I choose. It's like, that is the place. If you can tap into that, the deeper sense of who you are in that moment and honor that choice to really stand by it, that I think speaks to free will. And
Wow.
then the divine path is what unfolds when we make those choices. And that loving support from the spirit, creator, universe, all that we get do-overs, right? Oh, so you're gonna go make this choice. Okay, well, here's some repercussions, like this and this come from that choice. And then now what do you choose? And you're like, okay, well, a little bit more of that. And you're like, oh, okay, and then this and this come in. So there's really never a wrong choice. It's more what am I receiving from the choices I'm making, and how to come into that like authentic, clear alignment within myself, which maybe is what I'm referring to as free will,
Mhm.
and trying, intending at least to choose from there. And it's a path of bravery, courageousness, self-discipline, authenticity, keeping the negative ego, the doubt, the sabotage, the, well, she got it, why don't I get it? Keeping that kind of in the back seat, where it's like, this is a lot harder than all those other people did. Why is my path so hard? Okay, I still make my choice, whether it's the high road or the more difficult path, or, whatever,
Yeah.
but it aligns.
How do you get into your place of alignment? I think that's one of the biggest challenges we all face is getting out of our head and getting out of the shoulds and getting out of the well, I'm supposed to's. And you mentioned it's brave work. I think it's outside of healing trauma and grief. I think following your truth is the bravest work that's out there.
And it's exciting to see another person do it, because it brightens you, and then you brighten them, and then it's like, okay, we got something pretty cool happening. It's amazing.
Oh, point of this podcast too.
Yeah, no, your work is so exciting. It's so easy to talk to you, because I'm like, I just feel so much of what you connect to, and you probably feel so much of what I connect to, and it's
Very
meeting in
much.
a nice place.
Yeah.
Um, it's okay. So dropping into that space, it's um not difficult, because I kind of live there. But it's also not difficult to step out of it, to feel it's like leading with my head, and sometimes literally body language. Am I leaning in too much? Is my head, is my head in a place, but and I've left my heart behind? And then my feet, where are my feet? Am I connected to the earth?
It
So
is.
coming back, coming back, and then breathing. I I smile, because yesterday I had like a treatment with a massage therapist who's very gifted in somatic work. And he was like, Tegan, do you know where your diaphragm is? And I was like, I think it's kind of here. He's like, yeah, do you breathe from it? And I was like, I don't sure. And he's like, oh, didn't necessarily roll his eyes. He was much more gracious than that. But he showed me this, like, when we bring in air from our diaphragm, how calming that is for our vagus nerve and our whole body, how that releasing of fight and flight, of all that kind of striving, the diaphragm breath shifts that. So I just learned about this yesterday. And I was laughing to myself of like, wow, that's a life game changer. Like, it changes everything. And I would, maybe because I'm very excited about it, I'd be like, start there. Where am I breathing from? Where am I in my body? Am I even thirsty right now or tired? Like, come into the body. And then from there, you can drop into your space. It's not outside of you, it's inside. It's inside.
I love that you shared that because oftentimes when I start this podcast, it's guided, right? And the first thing is, how are you doing right now? How are you feeling? And it's the most simple thing, and it's so profound. The first class I ever taught, that was the very first question. I thought, "Oh my gosh, guys, you've got to be kidding me. This is where we're starting." And of course, that was my, that was my ego, and that was where I was at the time. And now I see the importance of just where are you? And everything you mentioned is just sounds like bringing yourself to that presence, bringing that self, bringing it to you. And it sounds so simple, but it is that impactful and profound,
Yeah.
I think.
We have everything. you
Mhm.
know we might not remember it, we might not know how to access it, we can get confused with all the clutter, but we have everything inside. The gift is not outside us.
Yeah.
So how to work with that. And I think that really speaks to so much of what you share, like the prompts where helping people think differently, hear words differently, receiving, how do I feel? I mean, they're signing up for a workshop, teach me something, Emily, and you're asking them, how do you feel? You're like, oh, I have to show up here. I have to like respond. It matters how I wait, where am I in this room? You know, am I driving doing the class, or am I like present doing the class? It's important.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting too, because I think somewhere along the line, there is this bridge of it doesn't have to be this perfect ceremonial experience every single time. Yet there is, the more I create, really create and carve out space in my life for my practice, it just evolves so fast. And then at the same time, there's days where we've got a lot going on and all we can do is it when we're in the car. But there needs to be both.
Yeah, it's it's free will, right? I want to do it now. And yeah, sometimes I remember this idea being in my awareness many years ago, like as in teenage years, where the best rituals can be spontaneous. You don't need to wait for the moon or the whatever it is that you need. It can be that moment of, I am in a sacred space and I give gratitude this way, or I, you know, have something to share or participate in the natural kingdom because I'm feeling it right now, the blessings of a sunset, whatever it is. I think actually what comes to mind is the writings with Starhawk, like the spiral dance and her work. If you're not familiar with her work, she's fun to look up, kind of the first wave feminist witchy information out there of like connecting with nature. And we're part of that too, folks.
Just an FYI. Okay, so taking this in just a slightly different direction, what are some of the trends that you're seeing right now? Maybe in sessions or in the collective? What are some of the things that you're seeing where we're headed? You mentioned Saturn's going into Pisces. What does that mean for the collective from what you're feeling? And obviously, if that revolution happened back the last time that happened for me, I'm like, well, yeah, so similar, but we've also evolved. So what's the new evolution version of that look like for us? Maybe you didn't say Saturn and Pisces for that, but
Good memory. um, I there's so much, and what I'll share with you, because speaking to the level that we're connecting on, the pattern. When I'm doing client sessions, I see patterns and symbols in my mind, and the one that's been taking shape in the last, well, 6 weeks, but the last 3 weeks, I'm like everyone, boom, boom, boom. It's like really kind of binging forward. Is this feeling of imagine being like a little kid, 7, 8 years old, pretty young, pretty light in your body in Hawaii, and you're in the warm water and you're held, and the water maybe comes just, comfortably to chest level. And then this like gentle swell of waves start coming to shore, and they're not breaking on you and it's not surf, but it's just a swell, and it's enough to lift you up off your feet. And so your feet aren't on the sand anymore, but you're being raised by the wave, and then it passes and your feet touch the ground again. And this feels relaxing and it's nice. So that's where we start with the image. And when you say like, hey, Tegan, what's coming on? The waves in this analogy metaphor are big, like tsunami, like, 18 stories high. My feet aren't touching, like that's a long ways down. And yet it's not breaking on you. It's not slamming you into anything. It's like lifting you out of a place where you feel grounded and stable. And maybe your feet don't even touch the ground. Another wave comes and it's erratic and it doesn't have a gentle rhythm, but the water's warm. You know where you are. You're not in control. You can't swim out of it. Maybe you can't see the shoreline anymore, but you know that there is that resting place that your feet once were on, and that's still there. That hasn't changed. And so the message through that image is kind of float along, because if you're like, my feet have to be on the sand and I gotta like get there, you're gonna drown. So or I mean, that's so fatalistic, but it's like you're going to really struggle because you're like, oh, my feet are on the ground, I'm relaxing, but I can't breathe. So now I got to swim up, breathe, and then go down and put my feet on the ground. Whereas if you just let it carry you, yes, it can be uncertain. You don't know, like, prefer my feet on the ground, but here I am, and trust that movement. This is what I'm seeing. And I, we'll work with that image in our own way, but it feels supportive. It is warm water. We know where we are in a sense, but we're not necessarily we're not grounded, and we're not in our comfort zone.
Why do you think the wave is doing that to us?
Because it's the change we've been asking for. It's why we were born here collectively, whether we know it or not. It is needed. It's time. We're not alone. Think of what the wave is. Like, maybe that's universal consciousness. Maybe it's like multiple solar systems and galaxies of guides. And we get to be the humans that feel. We have a heart, we feel emotion. We feel struggle in that too. But once we leave our body, we don't have this emotion anymore. We have different insights. But this is a beautiful, beautiful planet to be on. And we're going, kind of at the end days of a really dark time, thousands of years darkness. And we're ready to like birth something new that will take hundreds, thousands of years in a new direction. So these waves, it's like maybe the waves of life, and whatever our individual soul mission is at this time, we are witnessing, we are experiencing. And isn't that enough? Like, isn't that enough? Or maybe we have more to share or do in that. I don't know. Maybe, who knows?
Wow. Wow. One final question. What would you recommend to someone who says, I feel like I'm in that wave? What is something that they can do to care for themselves?
Listen to your podcast, build your healer team. So you have, people that can help support and validate, like, you're in a wave and it's moving. It's not crisis under the world, to help kind of situate a framework. I work with tarot, but there's great people. Find someone you resonate with, and make the changes in your life that you're aware of, that I don't like that anymore. I don't want that anymore. Don't just say like, oh, it's just my soul sucking job. Like, these are important messages that you can start shifting and changing and listening to. And you have the bravery, and it is time, it is time to respond to life because you're here. And it's part of your gift. And why not? Why not? So that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, it's so good. There's so many different avenues we could have continued to go down today. So I would love to have you on the podcast again and go deeper and further about these topics, because I appreciate your wisdom based on your experience and how you're helping so many people. So thank you, Tegan.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much, Emily. Always a pleasure to connect with you and all that you bring.
Thanks. Feels good to be seen. Where can people find you?
Online, tegantarot.com. I'm on Instagram, but it's really just nice sunset shots. My website's the easiest path.
That's why I like your Instagram's awesome, because it's always such beautiful in the moment pictures. So
Thank you.
all right, and people can book individual sessions with you for a tarot reading. They can sign up for your course and start learning themselves. And then you also have the group course coming up.
There's the online, you can register and start learning, practicing tarot, and like really developing your intuition in that framework right away, because all those classes are there. I don't currently have any advanced. I need more people who've gone through the beginner class. I've worked all my advanced people have gone through it already. So I'm ready for you guys, the next generation. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. And then if someone wants to work with you on an individual level to develop that, they would just email you
Yeah.
and work out some. Okay.
Yeah, we'd set something up that's the best schedule for the client for their needs.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You know what? Gosh, we have to go. There's just so many other things. I do want to touch on the fact that you do animal communication. And we've chatted about the fact that you've done your own space clearing. So I just want to say that for anyone, tarot is just one thing you get to do in your life. You get to be whatever you want to be energetically. So we're not just, I think in our human minds, we think, okay, maybe I'm a third grade English teacher, and that's amazing. Yes. And you get to go do and be so many other different things. So tarot is one beautiful avenue. There's astrology, there's pet communication, there's all different types of forms of things. So we'll get more into those on another day. Thanks everyone for joining today. And if you would like to work together with me on a more intimate level where we can really start to carve out your energetic gifts, your energetic skill sets, that is the alignment container. And clients have so many amazing things that they are creating space for themselves in this container. Some clients are expanding their existing business and practice. Some clients are doing energy work for the first time for others, which is amazing. And everybody is allowing themselves to really submerge themselves into all of their energetic skill sets and what's available to them. I have clients say that they have started perceiving energy more. Other clients are perceiving energy in a way that feels really safe for them. And all of them are getting to know themselves better and developing more of their intuition and really going there, because that's what you get to do in this space. It's finally this time where you can just say, oh, I just want to be me, all of me. I want to talk about me. I want to talk about my energetics and how do I get to bring this into the world. And when you do that, blockages come up, and we talk about ways for you to observe those blockages and self-heal them. That's so important, right? We want to be able to give you the tools to say, I can do this, and then this is when I need to call in support, which is very normal. So it's a really amazing space to explore your energy, explore your intuition. And if that sounds good to you, there are still spaces available. Did I stutter? There are. And when the elevated container is if you want to bring your purpose to life, we do get into purpose in the alignment container. The elevated container is brass tacks, actions you can take to actually bring it into this world. If you're not sure what your purpose is, the alignment container might be better for you to get started, get that baseline going. And then another piece of the elevated container is you may already have a business, but you're ready to take it to your next level, or you want to create more space in your life, more abundance, more time for family and friends. Because a lot of times the way we became successful in one area is not what's going to help take us further. Well, it will to some degree, but we really want things to balance out. And you're meant to be in that space of abundance of time, of health, of joy spent with other people. So if any of those sound good, you know to find it on my website or in the show notes here. And I have a new website coming out with all of this information too. It may actually be out by the time this episode comes out, and that would be really exciting. All right, until next time, thank you so much for bringing more of your light into this world.